When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
All right, welcome back to the Elias Makos Show. I'm so excited about how we're starting this second hour of the program, because if you are a politician in Canada and you wake up one morning and you're told by a staffer, oh, there's a big piece in the media today about you, and then you ask, well, who's it by? And the answer is Marieke Walsh, you're in trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, our honor, our pleasure to welcome Marieke Walsh onto the program, senior political reporter with the Globe and Mail. Marieke, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Listen, you've been all over this saga. Your latest piece in the Globe and Mail is literally titled "The Fall of Justin Trudeau." Why don't you let's talk about that. How would you define, as someone that has covered this inside and out and has access to so much information, how would you describe the fall of Justin Trudeau?
I think the person who described it best in that piece that you're referencing was Laurie Turnbull, who is a political scientist at Dalhousie University based in Ottawa, and she's very plugged in politically. And her take is that he lost control of his legacy because he stayed too long. He refused to see the defeat that was coming. And I think it really is right now, when you look at his tenure and where he's at, a real case study in knowing when to leave and in what happens if you don't take the door when it's first opened for you, or when the signs really start to pile up. And by waiting so long, just the image yesterday of the Prime Minister standing so deeply alone outside his house with nobody around him spoke volumes about how much has changed in his political career and trajectory since 2013, 2014, 2015, when it was all about Team Trudeau, all about the big Liberal family around him and his own family around him. It was a real,
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
It just was a really stark contrast to how it began. And I think it speaks a lot to something that a lot of politicians struggle with, which is knowing when to go, because there are some really remarkable moments and policy achievements from the Prime Minister's legacy in government. It's just right now hard for Canadians to see them because they're over him.
So let me ask you, because in that latest piece, there's a chart, a graph of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's approval rating over the years, right, since 2015. What were the moments where there should have been the reflection? Was it policy decision, world event? What are the things where, it's time to look at the exit? What do you think are those moments that defined his fall?
I think you can begin back in 2021 in the election campaign, where he called the SNAP campaign 2 years early. And if you actually take the bird's eye view on those polling numbers, on the approval numbers, they never really recovered from that moment. They became very buoyant during the pandemic. He really had a lot of goodwill from Canadians. But once that SNAP election call happened, it really changed the mood. It changed the trajectory. And even though there was times where he sort of got back to even with the Conservatives or was a little bit ahead, it wasn't really material compared to, for example, when you look at the beginning of his career, when his approval rating was around 60%. So I think that is something, when you've won 3 election campaigns, but you just scrape by and have almost the identical results from the past one, maybe that's the time when you start reflecting. But again, I think it's also very hard to see it when you're in it. Think about what he was contending with. It's hard to think about, am I leaving when you're still in the middle of a pandemic? You're still dealing with the fallout, for example, from the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. Just the sheer litany of crises and challenges that have presented the government and Canadians in the last 10 years is a lot. And so, maybe you missed that window, but then when you lose LaSalle and Martin Verdun and Toronto St. Paul's in the span of 3 months, that you would think is a huge wake-up call. That it's not just the chattering class in Ottawa that has a problem. It's also the average Canadian that is now turning away from you.
With Marieke Walsh from the Globe and Mail. Marieke, I want to play you a bit of the press conference yesterday, the Q&A with journalists, when the Prime Minister was asked about Chrystia Freeland. Have a listen.
Chrystia has been by my side for close to 10 years now. She has been an incredible political partner through just about everything we have done as a government and as a party over the past decade. I had really hoped that she would agree to continue as my Deputy Prime Minister and take on one of the most important files that not just this government, but this country is facing. But she chose otherwise.
That's one of the stories, Marieke, that you're all over, and you've had such incredible information about Chrystia Freeland's resignation from cabinet. Was the Prime Minister truthful yesterday with Canadians when it comes to Chrystia Freeland?
I think he was. I just think it's a matter of which vantage point you're looking at this from. If you are, and I think, the most charitable and sort of benign explanation for what happened and how that transpired with Chrystia Freeland is that the Prime Minister's office truly did think that assigning her the biggest file, as the Prime Minister just said, was important, that was not a demotion. And what I've heard from people behind the scenes, though, is that they acknowledge that staff messed up the briefing of the Prime Minister in advance of that video call with his Deputy Prime Minister and sort of misjudged how this was going. And, it is, Liberals themselves will tell me it was a huge failure on the part of the Prime Minister's office, on the part of the staff around him, to have sort of the insight into the human dynamics and to be aware of the things at play. Because from the vantage point of Chrystia Freeland, that's the vantage point of the Prime Minister's office. But you can imagine from the vantage point of Chrystia Freeland, she had these reports in the Globe and Mail from the summer about the fact that the Prime Minister was trying to court Mark Carney for her job. He didn't clearly and very definitively shut that down in any way in the summer, even though he applauded her work, but he did not shut them down. He left the door open to our reporting, to what we were saying. And then in the winter, in December, just before she's about to deliver the fall statement, we have this new slate of reporting also about the dynamics with his office and her office, and about the fact that he is again trying to recruit Mark Carney. And in that entire week, he did not once come to her defense in the House of Commons in question period when he was being badgered. The Liberals were being badgered by the Conservatives over this. And then at the same time, he was at an Equal Voice event, which is like a women's empowerment, women's in politics event, where he was taking credit for appointing the first female finance minister. And then 2 days after that, he tells her he's firing her. So you can see from her vantage point why that is like such a misread. But I think there is also calculation and seizing the opportunity on Chrystia Freeland's part. This is not, everybody is playing politics in Ottawa, and Chrystia Freeland understands politics very well. And she took her moment to differentiate herself from the Prime Minister at the maximum pain point that she possibly could, in the way that she could possibly make the most damage for him. So there's no denying that she also had a role to play in where things are at now. And it will be very interesting to see how Liberals respond to her, because even though she has now sort of had a bit of a rebrand because of that letter, because of her resignation, she was widely seen as one of the issues, one of the problems of why the government was tone deaf on the affordability crisis, why it was slow to respond to it. And many people in caucus were telling the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office to replace her before he fired her.
Well, that's right. We have, remember the Disney Plus. Cancel your Disney Plus. That'll solve your household's financial.
The Vibe session.
Yeah, the Vibe session. Marieke, listen.
It's in your head.
I'm running out of time, but I do want to ask you one thing, because we started off talking about the Prime Minister's failure to recognize when it's time to head for the exits. Yesterday, he announced that he's still sticking around for almost another 3 months, right? What are you hearing on that front? I mean, it was a resignation, but it's a 3-month walk in the snow. Are you hearing anything on that front? If he still hasn't figured out when to go to the exit.
I'm not on that one, and I think that that's certainly not something that Liberals are going to gripe about now. He made the decision that they wanted, or not all of them, but that many of them wanted. And in fairness to the Prime Minister, Canada has not ever had an interim Prime Minister. That's not really a role that exists. And you can imagine if, for example, he stepped down now, there was an interim Liberal leader who became Canada's Prime Minister. There's no interim position, so they would be the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. And there'd be a new Liberal leader who would be the Prime Minister in 2.5 months. And then there would be an election and another Prime Minister. That also is a lot of chaos and upheaval. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think there's a good rationale for continuity of government that he would stay. And he also definitely, from the sources we've spoken with, did not want to leave. Marieke, in advance of that.
Marieke, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Great touching base with you this morning. I appreciate you and your work.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Marieke Walsh is a senior political reporter with The Globe and Mail.